Hello, welcome to Loremaster's Lair. I am your Loremaster, and this is part 2 on our video on Varisian. Part 1 and part 2 are basically just one big video, just split in half so that viewers who want to watch my content don't just sit through an hour-long video. Watch part 1 before coming to this one, but it should just be right next to this video. Anyway. Moving on from where we left off, the third largest city in Varisian is Windward. Windward started as a pirate haven, its cove being a nice place for them to make shore. It slowly grew into a lawless town, but recent leaders have made strides to making the place, well, at least safe for residents and visitors, in order to maximize the cash flow. The leader of Windward is the Overlord, the one who manages to take the power, the current one being Gaston Cromachi. He is the one who's been spending the trade tax on guardsmen to keep some stability within the city. Under him, and other overlords, traditionally 8 crime lords control the city. The next overlord is soon to be chosen from among these when the former one passes. Each one has their specialties, from smuggling to drug trade to being the owner of the largest casinos in town. Even the leader of the Cipher Lodge is counted among these overlords, these crime lords, in order to get a hand at the powers in the city. We don't have as much information on this district as we do some of the other large cities of Varisian, but we do have enough to break it down. In the north, outside the main gate, is a small shanty town named Lowertown. Named so because it's the only place people are expected to first arrive by land. It is also here henchmen for the crime lords are first recruited. Inside the city gate is the Windward District, the largest district built alongside the side of the cliff face. It is mainly residential, but has a little bit of everything for those who do not want to chance the other districts. Down a bit farther is the Wharf District, the main docks of the city. While it still has many shops, taverns, and the rest, under Cromachi most of the business has moved north, meaning this district is falling more and more into poverty. However, if you want to see true poverty, you follow the coast to the east, to the Rotgut district, a place where only the poor and the seediest taverns and brothels are located. Despite the squalor, every crime lord has at least some influence in the area. Wouldn't be a crime lord without it. If one were to go west, however, you'd reach the River District, a district built onto both sides of the Valashu River. This is where many of the shops and mills of the city is located. In addition to the River District, there are 2 other districts on the west bank of the river. To the north is the Freecoin District, home to many of the newest and largest gambling halls. This includes the 3 owned by Cromachi himself, which is why this area has the lowest taxes. To the south is the Windward District, the home of the most affluent of citizens. This includes many scholars and scribes, as well as many members of the Cipher Lodge. One more district, which resides outside the city, is the Boneyard, the city dump and ship graveyard. While not technically a district, the location is home to various rail rats and a large dungeon created from the hulls of ships. So close enough. One more place that must be mentioned is the Cipher Gate, the age-old arc mysteriously fused with surrounding stones. It stands in a town's harbor, 700 feet in diameter, and some speculate a perfect ring, which circles down into the ground. Many suspect it was crafted by the Ancient Tassalonians, but the runes which cover the entire arch are different from known Thessalonian runes. This is a mystery which has drawn many to the city. As a pirate city, Riddleport is not as interested as some others to have influence over other cities. But there is one it does have such power over: Roderick's Cove. Long having held off the pirates of Riddleport, the city eventually was not able to stand on its own financially, and agreed to follow under Riddleport's influence. Both sides did end up benefiting from the agreement, but the people of Roderick's Cove still dream of a day they become independent again. Which brings us to our third side tangent, another organization, Cypher Mages. With Secrets of Magic currently out, we now have 2e information on rune magic. However, even now that New Tassalonia has risen, that does not invalidate the years those of Riddleport have spent examining the mysteries of the region, taking bits of pieces for their own. These mages have examined many towns throughout the region, but the main bulk of these mages settled in Riddleport and their Cipher Lodge, due to the prominent Cipher Gate. Likewise, Cypher Mages are all interested in the history of Tassalonia, but each have their own section of it that they can nerd out over. This brought them into conflicts with each other, until recently when the Rune Lords began to awaken, and the secrets of Varisian became a matter of life or death. So the group of rival mages came together, uniting their various specialties in order to help head off the next disaster. And now, with the rise of New Tassalonia, this knowledge might be even more important than ever. For those currently found to be Cypher Mages, there are those known as Rune Sages, who use a runic focus as their arcane bond to have their school treated as that of the rune magic equivalent. There are also those who are Sigilises, who are maguses who, instead of just focusing on the magic portion of the rune magic, also became martial adepts in order to actually stand up in a fight, mostly focusing on runes to empower their armor and weapons. And finally, there are those who do not just work with runes, but devote themselves truly to the path of the Cypher Mage, master of the written word, being able to manipulate scrolls, sigils, monsters Tassalonia was associated with, and of course, the 7 runes. Eventually, these people study to the point where they are strong enough to be rune lords of their own right. An interesting start when one remembers only 2 of the 7 slots are currently filled. Also an interesting thought when, again, Secrets of Magic out, but don't use information from new books, so that would have to be something from another time. Anyway, going down by city size, the next is one which we have only a small bits of information on, it not being one fully explored individually, like the others due to it not being a human city, but a dwarven one. Yanderhof was one of the 7 sky citadels, which once made up the dwarven empire of Targed. Close enough. I'm not going to pronounce that. Like many of the sky citadels, it was able to continue on without the wider dwarven network, trading with the Shanti people and being the single largest concentration of Shanti outside their own villages. When Chiliacs started the formation of Carvosa, they established contact with the dwarves and worked out a trade agreement, allowing goods to flow between the bitter rivals of the natives and the settlers. The things the Yanderhof are most known for are mining and metalwork, their mines full of copper, iron, and mithril, and their blacksmiths renowned throughout the place known as the Saga Lands. Now, one bolder departure, Nether, the fifth largest city in Varisian, is not one founded by Chelish settlers, but instead a city which has existed longer than anyone remembers. Khal Maga. The existence of Khal Maga was first recorded by the first Runelord of Greed of Old Tassalonia. On examining a strange hexagonal structure on the Stroval Plateau, he found it occupied by a strange group of creatures he named Khalborn, an immortal hive mind which sustains itself by eating human thoughts. And other species thoughts. You know what I meant. Humanoid thoughts. A deal was broken between the two sides, giving those who held the title of Runelord of Greed access to much hidden knowledge, and the city was turned into a prison. This went on until Earthfall, when the all-knowing Khalborn foresaw the tragedy and locked themselves deep underground, taking foreknowledge of the events with them, leaving the Runelords in the dark until other diviners informed them of the fall much later. While Tassalonia fell and the Khalborn went into hiding, Khal Maga stood, the descendants of prisoners creating a vastly diverse population, which became even more so as word spread of a city where anyone could start anew. As the outside world struggled to rebuild, Khal Maga thrived as the legendary lawless city where all outcasts can find their own place. First, before we go into various districts, the diverse population of the city makes it different from the rest of Varisian. So let's go through it quickly. First, humans are diverse, coming from both the local Varisians to as far away as Tianchi and the Impossible Kingdoms, and including unusually strange ethnicities and subgroups who are cast from their own homes. Examples being those known as the Iridian Fold and those called the Sweet Talkers. The only human ethnicity which only has a small presence in the city are ironically the neighbors of Shanti, partially because of half-remembered memories of the city's former purpose as a prison. For other common races, elves tend to not find themselves within the city, while the neighboring dwarfs, the wonder-seeking gnomes, halflings, especially those who are former slaves, and half-elves and half-orcs looking for their own place are all represented as part of the city's population. Outside that, typical monstrous races also find a home in this place. Examples being Nagas, specifically the Dark or Spirit Naga subtypes, Trolls, who end up inadvertently being Augurs, who use their own guts to tell fortunes, Centaurs, who tend to be the ones to deal with the local Shanti tribes, and who ride across the Stroval Plateau as messengers, and Gargoyles, who are local to the Stroval Plateau, but sail in the city as people who just mock the residents from the rooftops instead of clawing their eyes out. Basically, whenever a monster appears, the people of Khal Maga try to see if the strange creature can be reasoned with and lived with in peace, killing only when given a firm and painful no. The city is divided into 11 wards, divided into two sections, the outer ring and the center. First, starting with the 8 sections of the outer ring, the first is Ancient T, which is referred to as the International District. This being Khal Maga, it is known for strange traditions that have been run out of far-off lands. This is the only area of the town which allows undead, and it is common to see them in the streets. It is also the home of a mysterious religion, the cult of the Child Goddess. what the cult Falling Tales is unknown, but it involves men carrying palanquins, bearing beings which are never seen by outside eyes. Whether spells are given by these so-called gods is unknown. The second district, Bis, is a place obsessed with height, the residents building homes upon the outer wall, seeing the height of their balconies having more prestige the higher they are. Bis is also home to the Kiln, home to the famed golem works of the Ardark family. These golems are charged with keeping the peace and reporting incidents to the Ardarks to arbitrate, the crafters being generally logical. The Bottoms gets its name from being the farthest below the elevation of the Ed districts, and it is the gathering place for freedom fighters from across the region. The group, called the Freemen, have always called for democratic ideals, but the voice has gotten stronger as revolutions have been successful across the Inner Sea region in recent years. These groups tend to meet in a place known as the Common House, a place of worship for Caden Kalen, where the drinks flow freely, because of course they do. Anyway, fourth, we have the Capriclade, the center of heavy industry of the city, where rivers flow throughout the entire city. Many are purposely routed to power the mills of this area. Capriclade also hosts the temple known as the Temple of the Endless Steppe, a monk temple which takes the basic ideals of dedication and structure and turns them up to the highest of seriousness. It is named after a former master who kicked his way down the cliff face that the city is built on and lived. Many masters of temple have attempted to enact this miracle. Attempted. Next, getting into the center, but still part of the outer ring, is high-side stacks. 16-story tall towers which look down on the groundlings below. They house the rich and the elite, who tend to stay separate from those on the outside, to the point that no one truly knows who lives there. The connecting point between the inside and the outside are many small boutiques and high-end shops, which are mostly patroned by the high-paid servants who spend their paychecks there, and who pass along words from those above to those below. 6, we have Kuryat, the place thought of as the art district, aka the place where lots of taverns which artists spend their time in between works, looking for muses. But there are actually places like the Lyceum which strongly promotes the arts. Unfortunately, it is also home to the former temple of the Brothers of the Seal, a monastic group which had a falling out due to disagreements. You should not explore dark alleys at night, or you might get caught up in their fractal conflicts kind of falling out. Enjoy your drinks while you can. The Tar Heel Promenade is home to the permanent shops of Kalmarga, not the ones that depend on shipments coming from outside. It is also a place one can find those who focus on magic, many of the shops here being those that deal with spectacular powers. You will also find that this district is the home to the most temples of the city. From the 2 patron temples to Asmodeus and Abadar, to the place known as the Street of the Little Gods, a place which has shrines to gods from all across Galarian, and where followers prophesied on the streets, often shoulder to shoulder with other prophets. Finally, the 8th and final part of the Outer Ring is the Warrens. This place is the most common entrance to the city, due to the fact that it is a giant hole in the wall. Most of the poorest residents of the city live in shacks stacked 7 high, pushed close together and maze-like to the point where only the residents know how to actually find their way through. Strangely, those who are born in the area have a high chance of being born with deformities, the cause of which is mysterious and unknown. Now looking at the 3 central districts, the first, which brings in the most visitors, is the Down Market. The district is mostly empty space, set aside for traveling merchants to set up temporary stalls. Thousands of different travelers come here to sell their wares that are just as diverse as the people of Kalmarga itself. There are also a few permanent fixtures which exports goods from Kalmarga to the outer world. The second, also place famed by outsiders, is Hospice. This is where a diversity of inns and other temporary homes of Kalmarga can be found, and entertainment halls. I mean, like taverns and gambling dens, but come on. We know why you are in the entertainment district. The red light district. Finally, Windowshins. The place for people who have come to this crazy, diverse city in order to go and live in a sanitized gated community. In order to stabilize the area, everyone who lives in the district formed a citizens' council, where they can slowly shackle themselves with more and more rules before they control over their own freedoms. They also have hired a constability of constables. They hired constables, guards who keep the peace by being able to hit harder than the other guy. However, the surface is only one part of the city. The townsfolk know better than to go deep into the underground, where nameless creatures live in the shadows. The only ones who navigate and brave these paths are a group called the Dusk Wardens, whose entire purpose is to maintain the barriers of the tunnels and keep monsters from moving in. This place is divided into 3 main sections. The Undercity, the part of the city where some of the people from above ground are willing to use and maintain as hidden bases. The Barricade, the halfway point, which is designed to limit anyone from going deeper. And the Deep Halls, the location of Zavorak, the City of Silence, the place where the Carbon retreated before Orfall and where they currently live. There's also a 4th separate section that cuts through all 3. The Half-Light Path, a safe passage used to bring caravans from the bottom of the cliff face that Kalmarga is built upon to the city above, constantly maintained by the Dusk Wardens, who, with any step off the designated path, a strong potential for death. And even these 4 sections do not tell everything about the underground, as there are depths even further that even the Carbon are afraid to explore. So in the end, the city of Kalmarga still continues to have secrets, knowing everything about the City of Strangers. For a final side tangent, I bring you something which the developers mistakenly said was going to be in Secrets of Magic, and which we might be getting in another resource soon. Blood magic, also known as Hemothurges, also known as Bloatmages. These mages live within Kalmarga, look at the power sorcerers have in their blood, and try to tap more strongly into it through maximizing the blood within their bodies. The term Bloatmage is a derogatory term for such sorcerers, due to the fact that the process oversaturates the body with blood, engorging their flesh to beyond what a normal human could be able to live through. And most don't. The pressure of the liquid in their veins potentially reaches a pressure enough to cause the brain to shut down, usually leading to the mage's powers going out of control and self-destructing. Some Hemothurges try to limit this in various ways, the most famous being the use of leeches. Despite the risk, they do find various benefits to the dangerous practice, including using their blood to restore spell slots, or gaining a sorcerer's bloodline power temporarily through drinking the blood of another. Now before we wrap up, there's one more city we should go over. It's technically part of the dependencies of Magnemar, but I would be remiss if I did not mention this one, because it's kind of a home to all 1E players. The old stomping grounds of Sandpoint. Sandpoint, as one might know, was home of the first adventure path, Rise of the Runelords, and has played a hand in the adventure paths Jade Coast, Shadowed Stars, Return of the Runelords, and among other more minor adventures. Adventurers have a decent chance of being in Sandpoint before, and I would be remiss not stopping by just to say hello. So, the place known as Sandpoint has been an important point in one way or another for millennia. During the times of Tassalonia, the point sat on the border between the domains of Wrath and Greed. Alasnist, ruler of Wrath, crafted weapons known as Hellfire Flumes on the border within the area known as Shalast to protect her border. Only for Earthfall not only to cause rulers to go into long sleep, but sinking the entirety of Bakrahan, creating the Rasp Coast as we know it today. Only one of these towers still stands, the tower base known as Old Light, which many natives and settlers mistake for the base of a lighthouse. The lighthouse became a landmark which the native Varisians used as their campsites in the cycles of travel, like many other landmarks you've seen before. Recently, settlers of Magnemar wished to establish a trade house in the area, only to find the natives already there. After an attempt to kill them all and blame goblins, the fur traders and the Varisians came to an agreement and allowed the town to be formed. The point is mostly divided into two halves. Uptown, which is sparsely populated and includes buildings like the Sandpoint Cathedral, and downtown, which is where a majority of the people settle, making the place densely packed with buildings. In the bottom edge of the south side, shipyards jut out into the main harbor. The city on one side, the peninsula holding the four manor houses for the founding families on the other. Off to the north, a small island known as Chopper's Isle, an island recently home to a serial killer and a long history of having a hidden shrine devoted to the demon lord Pazuzu. The ruins known as Old Light sit on the western side of the town, being the remains of a Hellfire plume from back in Tassalonia days. And like with all Hellfire plumes, it is connected to a deep tunnel network, which once connected to the other plumes, with the tunnels out of town having long collapsed. These tunnels stretch across town, leading to places like the Hellfire Flume beneath the Sandpoint, which currently sits between the current location of the Sandpoint Temple, where the fire is made, and the Shrine of the Shroud, where this region's local vigilante has set up shop. Finally, the Hitherlands contain various woods, goblin hideouts, and dragon's nest, where adventurers can find something to make the stop worth it. Before we end, let us quickly list off other cities of the region that aren't under the control of any of the big six. Elves have the cities of Osmeril and Crying Leaf on opposite sides of the Mirani Forest, the last holdings of the elves in this region. we already mentioned dwarf. Gnomes have 2 major cities, though Whistledown is half human. The other city is the mysterious Sanos Forest. Orcs in the large city outside of the hold of Belkzen has Orglin, the closest city to Kalmaga. Finally, Ilsurian is the only majorly human city to be independent of the 6 largest, being another city formed by separatists from Kavosa. And that is a decent overview of everything. You can tell I've been speaking for almost an hour now because I'm breaking down. Maybe in the future I will go through the individual stories of different places of the region, but I believe this is a good start. Either way, I finally have gone through a region with hours worth of lore, and can now begin working on the next one. I say as if I don't already have plans laid out for another big city next month. Another big region next month, not city. You know what I mean, even if I don't. Either way, come back next week where we go through this month's God video to cover a big one. And I mean a big one.